Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by 90s catchphrases. Oh, no, you didn't. Now, let's kill the lights and turn this mother out.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Scooby Snacks. The perfect crunchies for when you get the munchies. Be the goodest boy and treat yourself to a Scooby Snack. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. I'm a writer, director, editor, one-man band, and more. Todd's a musician, producer, actor, and editor. I mean, you wear a lot of hats on your side, too. At one point or another, we've pretty much done every single aspect of filmmaking. And so we try to bring that bit of knowledge and insight into what we do here, talking about films for fun and also for like analysis. What can we learn about the filmmaking process? Because some things aren't obvious. We were talking before the show started. I was catching up yesterday to meet up with a friend somewhere around the country. And my friend turned out to have been in a documentary about a trip that they made to, and it became like a thing. And it was really fascinating because they had this whole conversation with the producers of the documentary beforehand about like, hey, there are certain things we want to protect, you know, privacy being one of them, hence all my squishiness about, you know, being too specific about this, that, and the third. And they were like, so we want to make sure that you don't include, you know, the location, you know, like try to make sure, you know, you change their name and, you know, make sure that, you know, we do everything we can to protect our privacy, yet still get this story out in the most responsible way. And the producers were very accommodating. They were very like, okay, no, we get it. And when they showed up to shoot the doc, they were shoot the way I imagine it. So they're telling me about this, right? So they're telling me like, yeah, you know, they were really good about understanding our concerns and, you know, and they did a great job of like blurring things out whenever they were shooting it. You know, you don't really get a good sense of the environment. You don't really even see anyone around them. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, you know what they probably did was shoot really long lenses. That way you narrow the field of view a lot. That, you know, make sure a number of things. One, you're probably going to get a lot more depth of field. So background is a lot more blurry. But it also cuts down, the wider angles are no longer available. So you can't see anything that might give away what part of the country you're in, the location, any kind of specific details. And then of course it was, the other interesting thing is when you shoot longer lenses like that, I'm interested. I haven't seen the doc yet, and so I'll be interested to sit down and watch it. But I assume it also puts us much more in their personal space so that you can read their emotions a lot more, just to see what's going through their mind as they do whatever it is that they're doing in the doc. And I was just thinking about all that. And the other thing, you know, I didn't get into this big conversation with my friend, but I was like, this is why you discuss these things beforehand and pre-production. You don't want to show up to set and then start throwing your producer a bunch of ifs, ands, buts, asterisks, things to think about. It's like we think about that before we arrive. That way we show up with the proper equipment. We know how best to approach telling this story. Pre-production to me is the single most important phase of any project. Like I spend much more time in pre-production than I do on set for sure, but probably even in post. If I look at some of my biggest projects, I spent 6 months in pre-production, whereas I might have spent 2 weeks shooting and then maybe 2 or 3 weeks in post, like getting it all, finished up. That's how important pre-production is. And if you really want to make sure everything's being handled responsibly and appropriately, it really pays, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Absolutely applies to production whenever you know, okay, this is the parameters that we have to work within. Now we can do the absolute best to make sure everyone is happy on the other side. What's your take on pre-production?
I mean, yeah, for a lot of my early career, I thought, you know what, let's just run and gun, and let's just get it done. Um, but it just makes all the early decisions make the day of so much easier. And it's not like just going in and being creative, because there's so many people involved, so many circumstances. I mean, you're looking at light, you're looking at sets, you're looking at, are there a lot of people around that you have to navigate? You're looking at, what do I want my frame to look like? Did I bring the right lenses? Did I bring the right camera? How is the subject feeling that day? Like there's just so many outliers that if you're not prepared for, not necessarily the worst, but for specific circumstances that you think about beforehand might you might need to handle, then when you get in that scenario, you don't know how to make a decision. I mean, I know that I've seen a clip of Jonah Hill being asked by Howard Stern who his favorite director is, and instantly he says Scorsese, and you've seen that.
No,
and,
but I just
his
automatically knew like it's got to be Scorsese.
Yeah, right. But his reasoning was interesting. His reasoning was like, not for any other reason other than he instantly solves very complex problems. He's able to, you're able to see him in real time, pause for 20 or 30 seconds and then solve a problem that would have taken anybody else, like a day or a week to figure out. And he just figures it out. And that comes from a place of experience. Yes, but also preparation. And if you're not prepared for something, that the possibility of some specific thing happening, then you don't know how to respond to it and fix it in the moment. When you've got so many people relying on your decision making and your art relying on your decision making, it's really hard to get into a place where you don't know how to take the next step forward. So yeah, pre-production, so important. I just thought it was really cool when we were talking earlier about how you noticed. You were like, oh, they probably used a long lens, and they probably like, you were calling out what they probably did, and you're probably right.
I would be so fascinated to hear about some of those specific instances of when Scorsese does that, because in my mind, I'm thinking I am so in agreement with you that the pre-production is what really pays off, because in order to make those kind of decisions on set in real time, you have to understand the structure of your story and the point of what you're trying to accomplish that day. Like, what's the point of this scene and how does it fit into the larger story that I'm trying to tell? Because if it's not important that, the squib, shoots blood into the camera, then okay, we don't need to do that. Instead, what we can do is just get the reverse angle. We see the shooter, right, firing the gun. And now it's like, okay, now we can really still emotionally engage. We can still punch the audience, because the whole point isn't necessarily to get this visual effect. It's to do this other thing. And if the point is to get blood on the lens, maybe that's some kind of thematic thing that he's going for that day that plays into Goodfellas violence or something, then it's like, okay, maybe we can still get that without actually seeing the bullet strike. Now let's raise the camera, 8 inches, and we'll put it on his face, and we'll still have the blood hit, but the squib isn't working. We don't need it. We just need the blood or whatever. Like, I can only imagine, because he is one of the greatest. I mean, he's a titan of the industry. And so I would just love to hear from, both of them, Jonah Hill's perspective, but also Scorsese's perspective, whenever some of those specific things, what happened, what he adjusted, and why he made those adjustments. And I would throw my money on, the table that it's all about making sure I understand what the point of my story is, what I was trying to accomplish, and how can I still accomplish that with the new wrinkle of whatever he's wrestling on the day of. But it all goes back to exactly the point, we've been talking about, which is pre-production is everything. You have to know your story. To your point, you have to know things you could run into and how you solve those problems. If you can see around that corner, there's no story you can't tell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. What story are we looking at today, man?
Today, we are covering 1993's Menace II Society. So if you haven't seen this film, please go pause this episode and go watch it. We're going to spoil a lot of stuff. I believe it is streaming on HBO Max or Max, whatever they're calling it these days.
For sure. We'll look at a handful of things. Mostly, I think I want to look at, the story and writing, do some analyzing of the opening scene, talk about morality tales, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A young street hustler attempts to escape the rigors and temptations of the ghetto in a quest for a better life. It's directed by the Hughes Brothers, screenplay by Tyger Williams, cinematography by Lisa Rinzler. It's featuring Tyrin Turner as Caine, Larenz Tate as O-Dog, Jada Pinkett Smith as Ronnie, Vonte Sweet as Sharif, Charles S. Dutton as Mr. Butler.
Not much, just chatting.
Yeah, we talking about this Kansas trip.
Kansas? So what about Kansas?
So what are you gonna do, KD? You gonna fuck around out there in the streets till you get killed? Like your cousin, maybe?
What's that, sir?
Well, Sharif tells me him and Stacy have been trying to get you to leave with him.
Yeah, but I don't know about no Kansas.
Yeah, I hear you there, I was teasing Sharif about that before you came in. But what are you gonna do if you stay? Sharif used to get into all kinds of shit before he found the nation. Now, I'm no Muslim, but I agree with some of the things they say regarding black people. And if Allah helps to make him a better man than Jesus can, then I'm all for it.
So what you trying to say, Mr. Butler?
Whatever changes you have to make, then you just do it. You gotta think about your life. Being a black man in America isn't easy. The hunt is on. And you're the prey. All I'm saying is, survive. All right?
All right, man. So for me, this was a childhood staple. Like I almost have the movie memorized, and we watched it so many times as a kid. I'm suspecting this was your first go.
Why are you suspecting that?
I don't know. There's something about Menace II Society that I didn't assume would cross paths with Todd Tapia. And so if that's totally cool. This is just my assumption. But first time watching it, and if not, how does it hold up since the last time you did?
Yeah, it's the first time.
Okay. Yeah.
What about the Catholic school upbringing, private school, going Texas A&M, did you think meant that I hadn't watched Menace to Society 40 times by the time I was 16? Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm under no delusion how wide I am.
So first time, I mean, this is literally 30 years after it came out.
Yeah.
I'm going to this is the first time I've probably watched it since I was a kid. And I definitely noticed some bumps and bruises as far as whatever style and filmmaking. Well, maybe not style, but filmmaking for sure. But I'm curious, smooth ride. What was your experience kind of watching this, I don't know, historical film for me anyway?
Yeah. It's really interesting because let's just talk first on the filmmaking and decision aspect, having nothing to do with the story in general. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed a lot of it. I think that like the oneers they chose were really interesting. Like the one specifically that I noticed is him walking through the party, walking up with his cousin, walking through the party, which was just beautiful and awesome. And the blocking was really, really great. And that's the first time we get introduced to, and I forget his name, but the kid who was sitting next to him in that shot,
Sharif,
the Muslim kid, Sharif. It's the first time we meet him, and we find out what he's all about. It's just like, which I think is super important because he dies at the end, pretty brutally, and when he was a pacifist, basically, and so it was. Anyway, so the wonder, and there's several wonders throughout the entire film, and I think that they're interesting, and they create. I'm thinking about this in terms of 1993 too. It's like now I feel like the wonder is is like, so I'm over it.
Yeah,
like
same.
Like, but I'm thinking of it in terms of 1993 when it's harder to do, and done less. And so with that in mind, like, oh, okay, I'm in this, I'm with them. And it brought me in. I thought that, a lot of the acting was really strong. I thought that it was, real. It felt really honest and real. The camera work, I didn't really see the camera too much, like I thought the camera was, I'm thinking of this in terms of 1993. And in 1993, there wasn't, I feel like, man, this is really strong for that time.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I don't think it would hold up necessarily with today's filmmaking, but it's not far off. I think that that shooting that today, the same person shooting that today might make a few different decisions, but a lot of it is really solid.
Yeah.
That the lighting was beautiful in a lot of cases. I mean, what was the when his father kills that guy, he sees that guy get killed for the first time.
Sam Jackson. Yeah.
It was Sam Jackson, and that slow motion shot with the red hue on him. It was just like, I felt the decisions rather than saw the decisions.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great storytelling. And, so let me also get, and then, seeing a young Jada Pinkett Smith was really cool. It's just really cool. Just speaking on the actual story, it's really hard for, I'm going to be honest, I grew up in the suburbs of Houston and went to a private school and all that stuff. And we didn't have much money, but my parents found ways to make it work. And I don't know why I just said that, because who cares? Like it doesn't matter. But at the same time, like, this is not a world that I've ever been a part of. And so it was really hard for me to watch. And not because of the violence, even just because of the decision making of the people. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it was like, okay, violence in films is violence. Sometimes it's for the sake of it, and it's like, why did you have to make that decision? But in this case, it was different. It was like, why did those characters make that decision? Not why did the filmmaker or why did the writer make that decision? And that's why I feel like this film is really good, because I'm with the characters and I'm asking myself, I'm like, okay, he didn't really do anything to you. Why did you have to shoot him as a character? But that it felt very much like a decision from a human being, in the story, not the writer. And which is why it was so hard for me to watch, because I'm just thinking, like, this is real. Happens every day. It happened in 93. It happened before then. It's happening now. And it's just so hard for me to see somebody make such a final decision on something that really doesn't matter at all. Well, to me,
right.
Obviously what matters to these characters and these people is different. So that's all I'll say for now, because I'm really curious as to your experience watching this after so long.
Yeah, it was kind of wild. Because I don't think I've probably seen this since I was probably 16, and this came out when I was like, I don't know, 12. I didn't see it when I was 12 because it was in theaters. I didn't see it in theaters, and I probably saw it when I was like 13 and then watched it like on a loop, with friends, for the next several years before you finally move on to other stuff. Whatever, Friday comes out and you're like, okay, now we're on to Friday. But it was interesting rewatching it because at the time I couldn't necessarily, I felt, but I couldn't necessarily see where the film came from in parts. Like watching it now, I could see, I can see Juice influence. I can see the influence of Boys in the Hood. And I could just start to feel all the textures around it, around the time that it came out, so much more. I mean, Jada Pinkett Smith was on her meteoric rise because I didn't watch a lot of TV, and so she was on a different world. And I didn't get to really watch more than 1 or 2 episodes of that. And so I didn't know her from that. I knew her from Jason's Lyric, from The Inkwell. And so, because again, for the new listener, like all my reference in childhood was like 90% movie and then like 10% TV shows. Like as far as popular entertainment. And Larenz Tate was on his rise. Same thing, Inkwell and Love Jones, a few years after this. And that was kind of crazy seeing him in Love Jones after seeing him as O-Dog. Because O-Dog was like a character, he was kind of the bishop, from Juice, and just his erratic nature and aggressive, personality. But he was so much different too, because Bishop was kind of almost a one-directional character. O-Dog is a really fascinating character whenever you start thinking about both the violence that he's capable of. At any second he could explode, and at the same time how much love and compassion that he has for his friends around him. Like that, he's a really fascinating character, to me the most fascinating character in here. And yeah, so watching it this time, I'm so familiar intimately with this movie that watching it now was like, oh, there's an edit. And so I saw all the mechanics underneath it. And then I started to rewatch. I didn't get a full 2 watches in because I was traveling all day yesterday. But I watched it this morning. I got up really early. 8 a.m. is not the time to sit and watch Menace II Society.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It's not an 8 a.m. movie. And so I got through it. I started the rewatch. And then suddenly I had the same experience as you. I was suddenly now with the characters again. And I was much more emotionally in tune with what was happening on screen. And it's a fascinating movie. I mean, for me as a kid anyway, growing up, this was voyeurism because I grew up in a really tiny town where there was a bunch of wannabe gangsters, and I mean, not to say that violence didn't happen, but it wasn't as erratic and chaotic as it was here. Like you could usually see the violence in my town coming, and you could also know when, someone's making a threat. Like we had school lockdowns in the 90s for drive-by threats, and we would laugh about it because we're like, yeah, we know, we don't, even if we didn't know who was making the threat, we knew, yeah, we're fine. Like no one's going to actually pull a drive-by on our school. But as administration, you take that stuff seriously. And so we would lock down for half the day or whatever until, I don't know, the tea leaves read green light or something. I don't know what decisions they were making.
What's the decision that,
that matrix, I don't know. But yeah, and so watching something like this for us was voyeurism of like, oh, this is what it's really like, in all these other neighborhoods. We could watch this or Juice in New York and see what all these other communities are like. And some kids would take it too far and try to emulate, and whatever, talk trash to your friends using some of the dialogue in here. Like that was kind of what this was for me and for all my friends. Like this is just a window. And we knew what it was for what it was. But what's interesting too is also in context of other films of the time, like Juice. We saw Juice as a heightened drama, not necessarily fundamental to reality. This, and it's funny because if you were to watch back-to-back Juice and Menace, you wouldn't see it, what I'm talking about. We watched Menace and we're like, oh no, this is that real shit. Whereas we watch Juice and say, oh, this is crazy. Like, this is a good write, this is interesting writing. Same. And whereas you watch Menace and you watch Boys in the Hood and you're like, oh, this is someone's trauma on screen that we're watching right now. And that's a different animal. Like, this is a beast of a whole other, making. And the empathy changes while watching this versus watching a thriller like Juice. And so it's just interesting if you're familiar with, these kinds of films, then you can watch them with different emotions in play. Whereas if you're not as familiar, like if you are like you and it's like, this is my first time watching it, they probably all run together. And it's like, oh, there's not a big difference between, or maybe not, maybe you would see it. And maybe it's something that is more universal than I can appreciate because I just grew up on it. And so, yeah, watching it this time, though, I could see more of the mechanics at play. And that was an interesting experience to be like, oh. But I also remember that, like, the Hughes brothers were in their early 20s, like 21, 22, making this movie. That's so mind-blowing. You put a camera in my hands at, 21 and I shoot my feet. Like I lose a toe. Like, these guys, they got it. They just were fresh. And I completely agree, man. Like, when this came out, it was fresh and it still holds up. Like you said, 90%. Like, yeah, okay, you probably tweak a few things, you tighten a few bolts, but you don't really make any overarching changes. You don't need to. Like, it's all there in play. And it's telling the emotional story that you're trying to tell. And you're working through these scenes in the exact way you would want to work through it today. Like, all the camera placements there, like, it's just a little bit of whatever experience probably, behind the camera. And for their first outing, now they had shot music videos and that's kind of how they made their name, is shooting like videos for Tupac and some other people. And so they had experience, and that's still an avenue for filmmakers today, is, shooting music videos and getting repped off that and slowly building up your repertoire. But yeah, so I don't know, man. I'm all over the map right now, but I love it still, and I'm still glad that it holds up. You're kind of my window into this movie, in contemporary, film, because I'm kind of moved that it still works. So I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah. These guys made something that it's going to last for a while. And that's the dream, because these guys went on to make crazy films like From Hell. Why just picture the guys making this movie, making a period piece about Jack the Ripper. Like, what? That's so cool. That's the coolest thing in the world. And that's why I love, filmmakers, because you're artists. At the end of the day, you're here to tell stories. And as long as the story moves you and is interesting to you, you can tell any story you want. They didn't get backed into, okay, we only make Menace to Society and Dead Presidents. Like, they said, we can do whatever we want. Just give us a chance. And yeah, I'm just in love with, their story as filmmakers and their boldness to be honest. I can imagine it was hard, to sit down and say, what's the story we're going to tell for our first big movie? Okay, let's figure that out. Let's work through the pieces. Do we pull punches or do we lean in? And my God, did they lean in? Because this story it's packing a punch. And it starts with the opening. Like, that opening scene is strong. And it's very much the whole idea of, right, start as late as you can into your story. Don't show us waking up unless we need to see the character waking up. If that's an important moment in this story, let's do that. They said the most important moment is to see who they are, really. And it's so emotionally compelling and obviously memorable. Like, this has been referenced time immemorial. You talk to anybody who grew up on these movies and, you say, what you say about my mama? Like, I promise they know exactly what you're talking about.
I suck your
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like every scene in here has something. And I love, as we're starting like New Line Cinema, the logos we're getting the audio prelapse, and it's just perfect because it feels like a much longer oneer than it is, because it starts before they entered the store. Even we're in the first shot already. We've started this world. And we're hearing kind of background noise about what they're going to be doing tonight. And you hear them talk to somebody outside, like, no, get away from here, or whatever. And you can already start to feel the texture before we even have the visual. It's expanding the world. And then this whole first scene establishes the kind of world that we're in, shows our characters in their worst light. That's a really fascinating starting point. Let's watch our heroes murder someone and then rob them and then make fun of them afterwards. Like, that's a wild starting point for a film, because this is who we're rooting for. Now, let's see if we can make you love them. And so we back up. We start to add context. Okay, let's start way back. Watts riots. Let's go back to the 60s and see some historical context for this neighborhood that we're growing up in. Cool. Got it? Good. Let's talk about Caine. Let's see his history. Let's see what he grew up around and the forces that, were compelling him to move one way or another. Okay, here's his mom. She's strung out. And what's really fascinating is this writer's gone on to work on Snowfall. And you combine Snowfall with Caine's backstory, you're telling a very strong, compelling story about this Black community. It's very powerful. The war on drugs and where that comes from, how it started, like, that's very informative. And we just get a very small glimpse with absolutely no context, because Caine doesn't have context. He's a little kid. He doesn't get context. So we don't get context. And then we see, right, Caine on the porch with Purnell. And what's interesting about that is we see that whole scene reenacted later in the film, when Caine's on the porch and then Ant walks out. How does he treat Ant? What's his relationship? It's protective. Like, no, don't give him anything. He's starting to pick up on the father figure role and how to do it differently. And then Purnell did, who he respects. And it's not out of contempt. It's trying to grow up at 18, try to be responsible for a child at 18. I mean, it's a really big film with big ideas. And one of the things that I really love about this film, and it's so subtle that if you don't know you're seeing it, you just don't understand it, is the influence of Hollywood gangster films. So very early on, right, he's in the hospital and he's watching these old, I don't remember what it was, Public Enemy or something. And this is kind of also a Juice homage. Well, Caine he's watching this black and white gangster film. And what you need to understand is gangster films were a huge, huge Hollywood genre for decades. Like early Hollywood. I'm not talking about whatever, Scarface, early, 80s, Goodfellas, all those kind of, gangster films. I'm talking about the foundation, the roots in Hollywood. Blockbusters were gangster films. Public Enemy, the original Scarface, Gangster Squad, White Heat, which was, I think, referenced in Juice. Like, these are old black and whites. And so I'm pointing that out for a number of reasons. One, it's in the film. It's being referenced for a reason. And I think there's two reasons, is my takeaway as a, now filmmaker, adult, is I'm looking and I'm saying, oh, one, it's an homage, but two, it's also reminding the audience what they're seeing is not new. Yeah, we're watching, a black film that's kind of in the gangster genre, but don't act like you haven't seen this before. Don't act shocked. Don't act brand new. Like, oh, black violence. How dare you put that on screen and, exploit it and blah, 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 blah. Like, no, grab your ass and have a seat, because this is old classic Hollywood shit. Don't act above it and beyond it. this is the roots of Hollywood. And if you sit here and try to tarnish it as, glamorizing violence, you're missing a much, much bigger picture. And now you might need to analyze where that opinion and that thought process is really coming from. And I'll just leave that
Great
there.
point. Dude, great point. I absolutely felt that in the hospital scene because like, why show that?
Mhm.
Why else show that? And it was like so specific that he had just gotten shot, right? And now he's watching this movie, and we're watching this movie with him. I mean, from everything from the camera angle that they use to the specific scene of that film that we're seeing, hearing the gunshots. It's like, okay, well, it was very on the nose and actually, I mean, if I'm being, I'm just
please,
like how
stream of conscious.
I felt more okay watching the film. It was like a little bit of a reprieve because it was like, oh, it's not just, this is reality. It's like, no, this is happen. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, like this happens. Right. So let's not just because we're not seeing any white people in this film, it's not, just this world.
Yeah.
It's the world. Right. And there are others that came before this. And so just pointing that out really, really quickly. And then we go back to the story. Great point there.
Nicely said. And what's interesting too is we follow that up pretty quickly with another scene with his grandparents, and they're watching It's a Wonderful Life. Right.
Yes. And then his grandfather's look, he's like, he like tilts his, like very subtly, like just tilts his head and kind of grins at the corner of his mouth, whatever. And you can see Caine just like, oh my God, when will this end?
He hates it.
Yeah.
And I think it's pointed because like he can't relate to that world. And so the world that he can relate to is the one of violence. And they're presenting this world of forgiveness and love and miracles or whatever. And he's like, I don't know what I'm watching right now. I forget it. I don't know if it was It's a Wonderful Life or Miracle on 40 whatever street. But
Wonderful
it's one
Life.
of these. Is it? Okay. But it's one of these like feel good, like, okay, things are going to end up well. And it's like, that's not my story. I don't know why we're watching this because that's not my story kind of thing. And I don't think that's where the references end to me. And this is getting much more into my own projecting here. But I love that as the film goes on, we meet Sharif. We meet I forget the football player's name, Albert maybe, but he's going to go play football in Kansas, and I love that they kind of make fun of it, right? Kansas, you're going to bring home some devil. He's like, nah, Dad, I love my black women, and they're making a whole joke about it. But I love that it's Kansas because to me it's another light, very very light reference to Wizard of Oz, because Dorothy wakes up from her nightmare in Kansas, right? And so to me, it's like playing this other idea, like there's another place for you to escape to. And he's like, that's not for me. But what he does find, hope in, he finds hope in Atlanta, where, Ronnie's going. And that's an interesting comparison to Kansas. Kansas being, a super white, state, and Atlanta being a much bigger black community and population. And so he's finding another place to start over that would be a little bit more accommodating for what he wants to see in a community. And so I love kind of that contrast of it doesn't matter. Like if you want to just find a place, there's a place and it's not that far. You can move to the other side of the country and find something there too, but where you're at right now just isn't working for you for whatever reason. Yeah. The other thing, let's talk about morality tales, because this is a complex morality tale. I think normally morality tales kind of leave you at the end with a much clearer perspective of right and wrong. Like, even if it's not necessarily clear that the character chose right or wrong, you as the viewer normally have a very strong opinion about what was right and wrong. Here, it feels like we're playing into a morality tale because there's so many moral conversations happening, particularly through Sharif and his dad, and his grandparents, right? I feel like religion is the excuse to discuss morality. It's not used as the pure compass of what's right or wrong. It's kind of the navigational equipment. But I think you get to the end of this film and there really is no compass because there doesn't seem to be any logic for who lives and dies, right? If that were the case, O-Dog should be dead, right? Sharif should be alive. And instead it's just chaos because going throughout the film, it starts to establish some really interesting expectations, right? Choices and consequences start to create tension and a sense of gravity, right? We're going to open on a murder and we're going to flash back to his dad killing a guy. And we're going to see a carjacking and then the revenge for the carjacking. And then we're going to see people go to jail and die for their actions, right? And so there's just this cycle of violence that gets repeated. So as we see new violence happen and take place, we begin anticipating a consequence for that, act. Whether it's, Caine getting, jacking that dude for his Dayton's, for his rims, or kicking that dude when he's down, or pistol whipping his buddy Chauncey, right? This is a guy that had his back earlier in the film and now he's pistol whipping him. And so you begin to anticipate like, okay, there's a logic to what's happening. You do this, X could happen. But at the same time, not all violence is a result of your choices, right? Because at the beginning, he gets jacked and shot. That was completely random. There was no rhyme or reason to it. We don't know these guys. And they take out their vengeance and we never see these guys again. This is kind of the maybe that's a bit strong, but anti-Chekhov's gun, right? Where just because you see a thing happen doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come back later. Like sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Same thing, the cops, right? Jump Sharif and Caine. That's completely random. And remember, Sharif gets jumped and we know he's a good kid. That's his whole deal. That's his whole place in this film, is to be a righteous guy, a light for his friends. And so the fact that the cops are beating this guy down, you can't look at this and say, maybe something happened off screen that we just don't know about. No, because again, Sharif is there. We know this is just a random act of violence from these cops for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. And so we get to the end of this film. My point is we get to the end of this film and there's really no clear path for each character to have taken in order to exit safely. Because Sharif ends up dead. That's a good kid. He was getting out. He was about to go to Kansas. Caine, maybe he had it coming, maybe he didn't. But he was trying to get out. He was almost there. And so it's trying to leave you with a gut-sickening repulsion for what happened, because it almost becomes even more senseless if you let all these characters get out alive. And this is where you're supposed to walk out and say, oh, what am I doing? Do I want to end up like this? This is made for a specific community. It wasn't made for me as a kid, right? It's not made for me as an adult either, per se.
I was going to say that.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's made for a very specific community. And if it can, help whatever them as storytellers and, move in their career, all the better. But it's made for very specific people, and all in totality of it, right? There's a lot going on here that's much deeper and much higher than any one perspective that you want to take on it, because it is also in a Hollywood tradition of telling violent films, just as much as it's very specific and telling a specific story about a specific community that I don't identify with. And so, yeah, for all those reasons, man, I think it's just an excellent film. If I had to pick my star, like Larenz Tate is he's a king, man. I love Larenz Tate. O-Dog will forever be an incredible performance. And just seeing, like, if you back to back watch Menace and Love Jones and watch Larenz Tate, you just believe him. You believe him each time. Like he's that guy. And sandwich the inkwell in between. You're like, oh man, he is O-Dog, and he is this nerdy kid who can't get laid, and now he is this, completely smooth lover. Like, it's just a really big revelation of how wildly talented that guy is. Yeah, God, I had the other notes. I must have deleted it because I'm a ding dong. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, please.
So, just from I think I can say at the same time as saying, man, what a well-made, like timely, timeless in a lot of ways film, and at the same time say I never want to watch it again.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. One, that it was that real, right? And that it wasn't made for someone like me. At least it doesn't feel like. Maybe it was. Maybe it was. And it's kind of like a look. Just remember, how lucky you are that you don't have to deal with that kind of shit, right? But at the same time, it's like when I watch movies that are violent, Casino is another film that I just can't watch again. And a lot of it is Joe Pesci's character, is O-Dog's character, of a do not give an F about anything. And it's easy. It's easy to like, have a character that doesn't, but to watch all these like final decisions based on apathy of like 100% apathy of anyone else other than yourself is really difficult for me to see and to constantly see. So like a film like Casino, it's 3 hours long of all that, or a film like this where I'm just watching O-Dog just like destroy people. Like the guy, like I think about the guy behind the counter, and I think about the strung out druggy skinny guy that he shoots just in the alley, and his friends are like, what are you doing, man? And they just walk away.
Apathetic, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it is a world that it's hard for me to imagine exists. And so maybe that's why, it is made for someone like me to say, I just want to let you know that this is a thing. Just want to let you know while you're sitting up there in your comfortable house or whatever with your kids and there's no guns around you and everything, that this exists. FYI. And for that reason, I'm glad I watched it. For that reason, I'm glad, that I have been made aware in a way that hits me in a way that a film like this can only a film like this can do. That being said, I just don't like putting myself in a situation like, and there were a couple of moments at the end where I was going to be so mad if that kid died.
Oh yeah.
If the kid on the big wheel.
Yeah.
Like I would have been mad at you.
Yeah.
Like honestly,
yeah.
Because you know me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was watching. I was like, I felt it in my gut. I was like, I was about to get really mad. And then I realized, no, Wes is going to take care of me.
Yeah, that's right.
I know he's seen this film before. I'm pretty okay. I understand this kid's not going to die.
Yeah.
And thankfully,
I would never
right, so.
Not give you a heads up. Like, hey.
Yeah, that's the one thing that that like I want to know. Yeah. So that's why I felt okay. But anyway, just wanted to say that like it's I also feel like I can't really speak to it. I don't have I don't have a platform. It's not my place to speak to,
Well, I think the thing that I also appreciate about this playing for other audiences is it's so easy, man, in politics to hear someone in DC start ranting about, or whatever, even friends on Facebook, start just going off about violence in Chicago and violence in the inner city. And it's such a paint by numbers kind of idea of how to fix some of these problems. And it's like, okay, fine, great. Congratulations. You have all the answers. Guess what? There's people, little kids growing up in these communities. And for you to sit here and act like the solution for them is so simple and cut and dry, you're completely negating the human element. And watching something like this can maybe lend empathy for like, okay, maybe it's not as easy as I think, to just walk away and to change your life. And yeah, maybe it's a flare. Not even necessarily for help. I don't know. That's a whole other bigger conversation. But just for like empathy, if nothing else, like just stop thinking you know everything for 1 second, and stop using some of these communities as your own personal punching bag to make some kind of political point. Grow up is kind of my mentality. Anyway.
And it's just it's the only way that this film could have ended is with Caine dying. I feel like it just had to, and that, to point that out, like as a filmmaking decision to have him as the narrator, narrating his own death. I think internally, because I've seen so many movies, I'm thinking, man, he's probably going to die. But also I'm hearing him talk, so maybe he doesn't, but then, him saying, actually, I do care about living or dying, but it's too late. And then we end the whole film with a gunshot. Like, yeah, it's also, I feel like a story of just like the ignorance and the brashness, or the not really getting it yet, about being young, right? The idea of the finality of death, the idea of the loss, not just of the people around you, but yourself, like in those final moments before you go, like, the idea of, oh, everything, none of that mattered, obviously. Like all the things that I did, the things I cared about, the revenge, like none of it mattered because now I'm gone, I'm done, and calling, I feel like it was a call out to that of like, look, you might think you don't know if you care, but you do, it's real.
It really is. And I mean, I say this movie wasn't made with me in mind, right? Because this is not the community that I grew up in, but that's not to say I wasn't ever faced with violent situations. And to me, it is good to have that character die. It's good to watch movies like this and Juice and Boys in the Hood and Southland and, a bunch of others that are good reminders that, there are consequences. People do die, because there certainly were situations where I was in cars with guns being pulled out and people ready to be stupid. I've never owned a gun. That's a whole other conversation I will never get into with probably anyone, but I'm just pointing out that I'm not that guy. I've never been that guy, but I've been in those situations, and watching stuff like this is a good reminder that you can walk with as much swagger as you want. Bullets don't care. Like, if you see stuff happening, get out the car, do whatever you can, because this can be you. There's nothing special about you. Everyone is the main character of their own story. And I love that the main character of this story didn't make it out. That's a good reminder, and especially in this era of storytelling, because we need to see it. We're not hearing it. Music was, there's a lot of gangster rap. There's a lot of, pop, pop, bang, bang kind of music. And very, 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 very few of those songs were about, the character rapping getting theirs. It was always, they got to pull this, trigger. They came out okay. They kept it real or whatever. Like, we needed to see examples of where keeping it real goes wrong, to quote Chappelle. Like, you needed to see a story end badly, because we really weren't seeing those messages played out in other forms of entertainment and popular culture. And so having some avenues where I got to witness this is a good, like, okay, yeah, we're laughing, we're pretending that it's cool, but in the back of our minds, we're also like, yeah, but you know what? People get shot, and that ain't gonna be me today. So I'm gonna go home today. See y'all later. And so I'm grateful for the messaging for sure. The small impact that it had, on my life, whatever subconscious thing was going on in my mind, thanks to films like this, I very much appreciate it. And so, yeah, why not?
And just lastly, just like the purpose of it, to tell. To be, I liked how you said it earlier, like you almost feel like a voyeur. It's like a voyeuristic story, like a look inside the depths of a place that, like, I don't care where you are, you don't want to be, right? Even if you're in there, you don't want to be in there, right? And just like a look inside there, I think is important, and it felt like an important film as I was watching it. So.
Wow. Well done, man. Nice. I think that's all I got. Last tiny note, classic 90s cinematography. A fair amount of 3-point lighting. It seems like there's a lot of 2-point lighting to me. Like, okay, we'll have a nice rim light and a main key light. Maybe some fills, sometimes not, just kind of depends on the shot. But also love just how much like blue light there was to kind of cool scenes down in the background. Like a hallway is going to have a blue light with some haze, just to give it a little more ambience. It felt very classic 90s, and I could feel their music video influence kind of subtly at play here and there. Yeah, I love it. It works for me.
Good point. And you've called out before some films how they just don't know, they don't light Black people right. Right. And obviously the Hughes brothers like knew what they were doing. And I feel like they did it really well. It wasn't anything that I noticed, honestly. You would notice it because you're the, director, but
the times where they're underexposed, it's because they're supposed to be underexposed. Like
they're supposed to be. It felt motivated. Yes.
Yeah. Every time. And so, agreed. It's refreshing. Yeah. Love it. So, what are you going to recommend this week, man?
So I was trying to stick with kind of like a street theme or whatever. So anyway, this week I'm going to recommend City of Men. It's been a minute since I've seen it, but great film. Film. I think it came out in 07, 06, 7, something like that.
So there's two. There's City of God, that was the first one, and then there's City of Men. Oh. And so
City of Men.
Nice. Well done, sir.
Yeah.
I've got City of God on our list of ones to cover. And so eventually we'll get to that, because that was a seminal film in the film community. Awesome. So I don't know, maybe we'll follow it up also with City of Men, because that's a hell of a movie too. Sure. Yeah. Nicely done. Man.
Hell yeah. Thanks.
I'm not going to top that. I debated. This was a hard one, because I'm like, part of me wants to recommend Juice. Part of me wants to recommend The Inkwell. I am going to go with a new film. It's a French film that I caught randomly in theaters, called The Five Devils. It's I don't know. I like it a lot. I love it, to be completely honest. It's a small, intimate film. And it's French. And I don't know what they're doing, man. Apparently my favorite films this year and last year have just basically been French films. And so I got a little French man inside me that's trying to get out, and I will feed him baguettes and whatever else he wants, fondue, butter. And so, check out The Five Devils. I'll just post a trailer. It's a very small film. I don't want to overhype it, but it's got some really cool ideas. And I think it's most fun if you kind of go in blind. And I love the style. I love the cinematography. I love the performances. Just a really well-directed film. That's all I'll say. just hit play maybe. And it's short. I think it's only like 90 minutes. And so if you end up hating it, it's not that long. So, but it probably is a pretty strong love-hate kind of film. Yeah. And stay tuned for next week. I didn't want to quite leave the Hughes Brothers yet. And so I was like, let's see what else is in their repertoire. We're going to check out The Book of Eli. Denzel Washington, Gary Oldman, Mila Kunis. I don't know what else you want in a film, but that's got it all. It's got it all. Post-apocalypse. Let's see what they got going on, what else they're capable of, and how they've progressed over the intervening, whatever it is, 15 years or so. And so, yeah, check out The Book of Eli next week. And if you're enjoying the show, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note if there's something you want us to talk about, the kind of things you find interesting. Big shout out to Brockafine for the request. I hope you enjoyed this. And, feel free to drop us a note, leave us why you love it, why you love Larenz Tate in this. Yeah. And also shout out to Seth and Uva. They've been sending us some love over the trailer for I Won't Let Me Down. They saw that and had a lot of good things to say. Seth was, loving the 60 milli. He said that it looked great. He played it on, he said he pulled it up on a big screen and watched it. And he was like, man, it looks really cool. So man, big thank you. Same thing, Uva. Did you see his comment? He dropped a comment on The Great Dictator.
No, I didn't. What?
He left you a really great comment. He was like, man, I didn't realize Todd looked like Bradley Cooper.
Oh man, thank you, dude. Appreciate that. I've gotten that a couple of times. I don't see it at all, but I'll take it. That's a good looking man.
That is a good looking man. Nice. Yeah. And if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Menace to Society. And yes, that is 2 with II, the Roman numeral, which I have no idea. I think that was just part of the chaos of the titling, because if you also look at the title itself, there's caps sometimes and there's lowercase. It's all mixed together. It's all chaotic. I think to give a sense of the chaos of the film is my impression if I'm analyzing how someone titles their logo. Yeah.
Good analysis. And our quote of the day is from Spike Lee. I respect the audience's intelligence a lot, and that's why I don't try to go for the lowest common denominator. And that's, honestly, half of what makes a great film is are you treating the audience with respect and intelligence, and that might mean leaving a few people behind. You know what? That's all right. You're not necessarily making films for children. You know what I mean? If you're making films for grown adults, and not even just grown adults, specific types of people, right? Like a film like this is made for a specific type of person, right? And no matter what film it is, like know your audience and go at that, right? It doesn't have to be for everybody. In fact, if it's for everybody, it's for nobody. That's 100% what that means, because you're going to lose the people that you are going after because you're speaking beneath them. So yeah, we talk about this all the time. So great quote.
Ditto. Well said. Yeah.
That's it? You got nothing?
That's it. That's all I got. I'm like, man, you just killed it. Yeah,
cool. I just ran you aground. Sorry about that.
No,
yeah, thank you.
I didn't have a thought, laid in with it. I love what you said. So yeah, if you, I'll just repeat it as a good ending note. If you try to appeal to everyone, then you really made something for no one.
End of it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for the suggestion, Menace to Society. What a great film. What a great experience. I really enjoyed talking to you about it, Wes. Great insights there. Make sure you join us next week. Book of Eli, going down. And subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts, and share us with your friends. It all helps. It really does. Thank you so much again for joining us. We'll see you next week. Until then, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
Break yourself, fool!